He didn't leave because you were too much. He left because you were starting to remember. That ancient knowing in your bones, the one that precedes language, the echo of women who once sat in circle, moonlight casting serpentine shadows across their skin, speaking in symbols, not words, about the kind of power that made men kneel without touching them. You didn't forget it entirely, not like they wanted you to, but you diluted it. You turned it into politeness, into self-help, into waiting for a text, waiting for a sign, waiting for him to wake up. But you, the woman who's been single for years, the one who quietly removed herself from the circus of dating apps and performative desirability, you are not lost. You are returning. What they never told you, because they couldn't, is that your absence from the arms of a man is not a punishment. It is a pact between you and something older than any romance, your own soul's raw blueprint. Carl Jung wrote, in the pages never published, that the feminine unconscious does not seek union in the way the masculine does. She does not go out to find the other. She descends inward into the cavern of her own mystery, and there she finds that the other is always already within her. But to enter that descent, something must be surrendered. Not a man, but the fantasy of being completed by one. That's why so many women vanish from relationships just before they become unbearable. Not because they couldn't compromise, but because something whispered from the dark, "This is not your altar." That whisper is the beginning of the withdrawal, not his, yours. But society doesn't have a name for this kind of power, so they call it bitterness. They call it a phase. They ask if you've tried harder, if you've opened your heart. They diagnose your sovereignty as a wound. And most days, you almost believe them, until the night stretches long and your chest opens like a sacred scroll, and you remember, your solitude is not a symptom. It is a ritual. A woman alone is a woman mid-initiation. Do you feel it now? The way silence has become a second skin. The way you walk through rooms like a prayer no one taught you. That isn't numbness, it's refinement. You've been distilling your desire, your truth, your no, your capacity to listen to your womb's dreams, not your mind's panic. And meanwhile, he senses it. Yes, the archetype. The man who once held your face and said you feel like home, only to disappear into smoke before morning. He knows you're remembering. He feels the pull of your energy recentering, but he cannot name it, because the masculine has been taught to chase certainty, achievement, validation. And you are becoming a storm of uncertainty, of sensual presence, of radical stillness. You are not a goal, you are a mirror. And no man looks too long into the mirror without seeing his shadow. So he runs, he ghosts, he reappears at midnight and vanishes by sunrise. He calls your depth too intense and your voice too much. He forgets your name, but never forgets your scent. This is the sacred push-pull, the energetic exorcism of every man who has been conditioned to want the feminine without having to meet her in soul. And the woman who stays single for years, she's not waiting for a man to understand her. She's watching, silently, to see who survives the fire of her absence. Let me tell you a secret Jung hinted at but never spoke aloud. Men who fear the feminine will subconsciously test her disappearance. They will provoke abandonment, not because they want to be left, but because they are terrified to stay. Not terrified of the woman herself, but of the part of themselves that would be awakened by her gaze, because she doesn't just see him, she recognizes him. And nothing is more dangerous to a man who has built his identity around performance than being seen through by a woman who no longer needs the act. That's what your solitude has done, hasn't it? It has stripped you of illusion. You can hear lies in the tone of a "hey" text. You can smell insecurity behind overconfidence. You know when they want your body but not your being, and so you remain single. Not untouched, not unloved, but unsold. Because once a woman has tasted her own soul, no man who avoids his will satisfy her. There is grief in that. Of course there is. Some nights you ache. Not for him, but for the version of you who didn't yet know the price of denying her truth. You miss her innocence, her hopes, her softness that hadn't yet learned discernment. But you don't want to be her again. You want to hold her, to rock her in the cradle of your seasoned arms and whisper, "We made it through." And so the years pass. No wedding ring, no anniversary photos, no hand to reach for at 2 a.m. But also, no pretending, no performing, no compromising sacredness for companionship. This is what society cannot understand, and what makes women like you both feared and misunderstood. Your standards are not high. They are holy. A man can no longer win you by showing up. He must arrive initiated. He must have kissed his own shadows. He must have broken open in solitude and stitched himself back with intention. He must want more than your warmth. He must want your cold. The part of you that bites, resists, doubts, rages. He must want to be devoured by your realness and reborn by your silence. But here is the truth no one dares say aloud. Most men are not built for that. Not because they are incapable, but because they have never been taught how. They've been trained to conquer women, not to commune with them. So they confuse your silence with rejection, your absence with punishment, your standards with ego. But you are not punishing anyone. You are simply holding space for the kind of love that does not collapse in the face of your power. And that space, that vast, holy, aching space you've been protecting, that's the altar. That is the real relationship, not between you and a man, but between you and the divine masculine as it lives within your field. That energy that doesn't text back but sings in dreams. That doesn't flirt but ignites your creativity. That doesn't seduce, it summons. This is the secret Jung buried beneath archetypes and dreams. That true union begins in the invisible. And the woman who stays single for years, she is not behind, she is ahead. She is building the bridge no man has dared cross until now. Because the next layer of this revelation, the deeper hunger behind all this, is not about her, it's about him. And before I show you the hidden face of his longing, the one he's buried under bravado and distraction, you must understand the force that makes him disappear in the first place. Not fear of you, but fear of himself through you. He wanted to stay, you know. He didn't ghost you because you weren't enough. He disappeared because you reminded him of the part of himself he was taught to bury. Carl Jung once scribbled a confession into the margins of a lecture. When a man meets his anima, he is both drawn and dismantled. Anima, the feminine within him, the dream voice, the wild longing, the soulful pull toward depth he cannot name. She shows up in many forms: the lover, the muse, the goddess, the threat. And when a man sees a woman who embodies this force, not just in body, but in presence, he collapses inside, because she awakens the part of him that no longer wants to chase, but kneel. And that is terrifying for someone who has built his masculinity around control. You, the woman alone, carry this archetype, not because of what you do, but because of what you no longer pretend. You don't perform need. You don't beg for crumbs. You don't shrink when he pulls away. You watch. You wait. And not for him, but for truth. That waiting burns him. You must understand. He's been raised in a culture that has never taught him how to sit inside his own yearning. He's been handed a mask labeled man, strong, silent, desirable, and told to wear it, no matter how much it chokes him. And then he meets you, and something inside him howls. Not the ego, not the mind, but something deeper, the original boy. The boy who once looked at the moon and felt her watching. The boy who cried into his pillow because no one told him his feelings were sacred. The boy who wanted to be chosen, not just admired. That boy lives in every man. And when he sees your presence, not your body, not your charm, but your unwavering soul, he remembers what it felt like to want without shame. But there's a catch. Wanting you requires losing the mask. And to lose the mask means losing his identity, so he pulls away. Not because you are too much, but because you are too real. He may not even know why he's withdrawing. He might blame work, timing, you. He might say he's not ready, not good enough, or worse. say nothing at all. But underneath all of that noise is a hunger he doesn't know how to feed, because what he really wants is to surrender, not in weakness, but in awe. You are the temple, but he was taught to fear temples. He was told they devour men, that to worship the feminine is to lose himself. They never told him that to worship the feminine is to find himself. And so he runs. He'll choose the simpler love, the easier woman, the one who doesn't awaken the dead gods in his chest. Not because she's less, but because she doesn't ask him to meet his own soul. That's what you do, without words, without demand, just by being, just by sitting in the stillness of your own truth. You provoke his forgotten fire, and fire, to the uninitiated, feels like danger. So he convinces himself it was nothing, a spark, a phase, a dream. He returns to the rhythm of normal life, but nothing feels the same. Food tastes dull, touch feels empty, laughter echoes without root, because he isn't missing you. He's missing himself through you. But this is where most women falter. They think it's their job to help him remember, to love him into healing, to teach him how to stay. Don't. That is not your path. The sacred feminine does not chase. She does not convince. She does not wait at the altar of unready men. She beckons, and if they cannot walk, she lets them crawl back into their sleep, because she knows the real hunger is not for her body, her time, or her validation. The real hunger is for the union, the collapse of separation, the sacred meeting where both the inner masculine and feminine bow to each other inside one chest. But he has not yet met his own feminine, his anima, his soul, so he cannot meet yours. This is the heartbreak women like you endure, not the loss of a man, but the loss of a potential that never bloomed, the ache of seeing what could be, if only he was willing to descend. But descent is a dangerous thing for a man who has never known the dark. He fears it will swallow him. He fears it will strip him of power, of clarity, of control. What he does not know is that the dark does not strip. It anoints. You know this. You've lived it. The long nights, the unanswered prayers, the rituals of becoming, the shedding of masks until your face was your own. You've walked where he refuses to step, and now he looks at you with longing wrapped in terror. He wants to feel you, but he cannot hold you, because you are no longer something to be held. You are a force. The feminine in her full expression is not a girlfriend. She is not a role. She is not someone to take home to mother. She is the chaos before birth, the whisper before sleep, the tear in his chest he tries to name lust. But it is not lust. It is memory, memory of the divine. He tasted it through you, and now without you, everything feels like imitation. So he searches for noise, for bodies, for distraction. He tries to replace the temple with a screen, the prayer with a punchline. But your silence haunts him, because you never chased, you never tried to prove, you just saw him. And being seen, truly seen, is a hunger he didn't know he carried. Let me tell you something Jung never wrote, but every mystic woman has known. Men don't fear rejection, they fear revelation. They fear what they might become if they stopped performing, if they took off the armor, if they fell to their knees and said, I don't know how to be loved like this. That's what your presence does. It unravels, it undoes, it reveals. And so you remain alone, not as punishment, but as priestess. You are holding space for a kind of love that demands resurrection, not just of him, of humanity. Because when a man learns to stay, not in comfort, but in mystery, the world begins to change. But that change begins with you, not reaching out, not softening your edges, not lowering your frequency, but trusting that your absence is a teacher, that your silence is a sermon, that your refusal to be met halfway is a map for every man willing to remember. And for those who are not, let them go. Let them return to sleep. Let them call you names. Let them misunderstand your fire, because you were never here to be understood. You were here to awaken, and those who are ready will feel your pulse across timelines. They will ache for your presence before they know your name. They will rise, not with flowers, but with devotion. But before that, they must starve. Before I take you into the next layer, where a woman no longer waits but begins to reclaim her erotic power as sacred. I will leave you with this. You were never too much. You were the mirror he was too afraid to look into. It happened slowly at first, like the soft opening of a door you didn't realize had always been locked. You stop waiting, not out of bitterness, not because you've given up, but because something shifts deep within your womb, something primal. A knowing that whispers, I was never meant to pause my becoming for someone else's hesitation. You begin to feel it in your breath, in your hips, in the way your fingertips linger on your own skin after bathing. A reclamation, not of romance, but of erotic sovereignty. They won't tell you this, but every woman carries within her a current, a wild, coiled serpent energy that is not about sex as we've been sold, but about life itself. That is what begins to stir when she stops waiting. That is what she has been guarding all these years of solitude. Carl Jung would have called it the feminine libido, not merely the drive for physical pleasure, but the yearning for wholeness, for meaning, for sacred union with something larger than the self. But ancient mystics had another name for it, Shakti, the living, breathing, trembling pulse of creation. And when a woman has been alone long enough to shed the expectations of being chosen, of being polite, of being good, that Shakti doesn't just stir, she rises. At first, it can feel like grief, like waves of ache washing through your chest, your thighs, your belly. You're not sad, you're opening. The parts of you that went dormant while trying to be desirable are now stretching awake. Your sensuality stops performing and begins speaking, not to him, but to the trees, the moon, the mirror. This is the erotic awakening they never warned you about. Not the kind that attracts a man, but the kind that scares him, because it's no longer his to control. It no longer needs an audience. You begin to notice things differently. The air feels heavier when you walk into a room. People glance, then look away, as if they've seen something holy but can't name it. You no longer need to seduce. You exist, and the world rearranges around that. This is not power in the way men understand power. This is essence, the way a flame moves, the way a panther waits, the way water carves canyons without force. And yet, something dangerous lives here. Not for you, for the systems that depend on your compliance, because the woman who no longer waits is a threat to everything built on her silence. She no longer reacts. She no longer justifies. She no longer explains why she left or why she's alone. She becomes a riddle. And men, especially unawakened ones, do not like riddles they cannot solve. They will say you are cold. They will say you are intimidating. They will call your standards unrealistic, your solitude sad, your depth exhausting. Do not let them rename your divinity, because you are not intimidating. They are simply unprepared. You are not cold. You are discerning. You are not lonely. You are sovereign. There's a moment in every woman's spiritual erotic path where she begins to feel like she's becoming untouchable. Not because no one desires her, but because she can feel the misalignment in her bones before a man even opens his mouth. His gaze may linger, but his energy tells the truth. And when you can feel that truth, his confusion, his hunger, his fragmentation, you no longer reach toward him with hope. You bless him and turn inward, not in shame, but in ritual, because you know the altar you've built within yourself is too sacred for casual hands. This is what men mistake for rejection. But it is not rejection. It is resonance. If he cannot meet you in vibration, he cannot meet you at all. Jung believed that once a woman integrated her own animus, her inner masculine, she no longer sought completion through external relationships. Instead, she became magnetic to partners who reflected that inner wholeness, not replaced it. This is where you now stand, on the edge of magnetism, not effort. You begin to live differently. You no longer plan your life around the potential of a man's presence. You decorate your bedroom for your pleasure. You take yourself to dinner, not to prove anything, but because your presence deserves celebration. You walk slowly. You listen deeply. You speak rarely. But when you do, the air shifts. People feel you coming before you arrive. This is the erotic in its truest form. energy before body, desire without direction, flame without smoke. And it terrifies those who still think love is about earning, pleasing, chasing. But here is the secret you've unearthed in your years alone. Love is not something you fall into. Love is something you remember. You were never meant to be chased. You were meant to be recalled, as if a man touching your presence for the first time is actually brushing up against a dream he had before birth. And if he doesn't remember, you don't make yourself smaller so he might. You wait for the one who already does. The one who doesn't need you to tone it down. The one whose nervous system doesn't shut down in your presence. The one who has held his own pain long enough to hold your power without flinching. Until then, you live. Not in limbo, not in longing, but in lusciousness. You begin to create not for attention, but for aliveness. You dance not for the gaze, but for the gods. You write spells with your hips and speak prayers into your coffee. Every moment becomes foreplay with the divine. And yes, sometimes you miss being held. Sometimes you ache to be seen, touched, ravished. That ache does not make you weak. It makes you human. But you no longer trade your truth for moments of company, because you felt the difference between being touched and being met, and you won't go back. Because what rises in you now is not desperation, it is invocation. Your body has become a temple of invitation, not to be used, but to be witnessed, to be met, to be devoted to. And devotion cannot be begged for, it must be evoked. So you rest in your erotic fullness. You let your energy speak before your words. You let your presence be a filter. Not everyone gets in, because you are not single. You are in sacred union with yourself, and only those who bow to that union will ever know the privilege of touching your skin, your soul, your secret. But before we walk into the next phase, where the sacred war begins beneath his disinterest, and how masculine energy tests what it cannot yet understand, I will tell you this: the woman who no longer waits has not lost, she has remembered, and her memory is dangerous. It's not disinterest, it's defense. When he looks away as you speak, when he grows distant the moment your voice slows into softness, when he says, "I don't know what I want," but touches you like you're the last fire on earth, understand, you're not witnessing indifference. You're witnessing a war, a sacred war he's fighting with himself, in silence, behind his eyes. You see, the masculine psyche, shaped by generations of conquest, repression, and illusion, is not taught how to receive the feminine. Not truly. It is taught how to pursue her, conquer her, define her, but not how to be penetrated by her energy, not how to be changed by it. And yet, that's exactly what you are, a change agent. A woman rooted in her soul's erotic truth is not a companion. She's a disruption, not because she means to be, but because she doesn't play the game. You don't smile to soften your wisdom. You don't flirt to feel seen. You don't package your power in palatable phrases. And for a man who's only known women as reflections of his dominance, your fullness feels like a threat. So he distances. He pulls back. Not because he doesn't feel the pull, but because the pull is too much. It shakes the scaffolding of his inner world. It asks him to stop leading from persona and start living from essence. That's no small thing. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege demands a price, the death of the false self. And when a man stands before a woman who no longer dilutes herself, that death is no longer theoretical. It begins. He sees it in your eyes, not the part of you that desires him, but the part that knows him, the part that cannot be impressed, seduced, or manipulated, the part that whispers, "I see what you run from," and that knowing, it stings, because deep inside, whether he admits it or not, he wants to be stripped of the mask. He's tired of performing, tired of chasing women he doesn't actually admire, tired of pretending that freedom looks like detachment, that strength means silence, that dominance equals power. He's tired, and you offer him rest, but that rest would require surrender, not to you, but to himself. That's the sacred war. His ego says run, his soul says stay. But he doesn't know how to reconcile the two. So he does what he's always done. He disconnects. He critiques you. He chooses less intense options. He calls your passion too much and your insight too heavy. Don't take it personally. He's not rejecting you. He's rejecting the version of himself you awaken. Because your energy doesn't just offer love, it offers truth. And truth is violent to illusions. He might even accuse you of trying to change him, but you never asked him to change. You simply refused to entertain his mask. And that refusal acts like acid on the ego's carefully constructed identity. What you must understand, deeply, viscerally, is that a woman rooted in her spiritual erotic self holds a mirror, and not every man is ready to see what that mirror reflects. Some are still in love with their own delusion. Some are still married to the myth that love can be controlled. Some have never been touched by anything real, and realness burns. That's why his disinterest is rarely genuine. It is a strategy, a self-protection spell. If he labels you as too intense, too complicated, too demanding, he doesn't have to confront the part of him that isn't ready. But here's where it gets more complex. His soul is ready. That's the torment. Because the masculine knows, on some deep, archaic level, that your energy isn't asking for perfection. It's asking for presence. And presence requires wholeness. Not performance, not charm, but naked awareness. To look you in the eyes and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here. To hold your pain without fixing it. To feel your desire without consuming it. To worship your power without trying to possess it. This is the kind of masculine the world is starving for. And yet, it is also the kind that cannot be manufactured. He must become it. And becoming it means shedding everything he's been taught. That shedding is where the sacred war ignites. He'll feel like he's losing control. He'll feel humiliated, exposed, weak. Because for most men, vulnerability is not intimacy. It is annihilation. So he avoids. And you, if you are not deeply anchored, you will mistake that avoidance as failure. You'll ask yourself what you did wrong, what you could have softened, what you should have withheld. But your only mistake would be shrinking to protect a man from his own awakening. Do not do it. Let him fight his war. You are not here to be a medic. You are here to be a threshold, a living, breathing invitation to step into something ancient. The kind of connection that can't be faked, rushed, or earned. The kind that demands initiation. And the truth is, not every man will cross it. Some will bow out. Some will blame you. Some will try to return when they think they've grown, only to realize they still can't meet your depth. But one day, one will. He won't come with flowers. He'll come with scars, with stories, with eyes that have cried and hands that have trembled. He'll come not to impress, but to witness, not to own, but to honor. And you will recognize him, not by what he says, but by what he doesn't hide. But until then, do not stop being the woman who provokes the war, because that war is holy. It is the friction between the false and the real, the last stand before transformation. And if he runs, let him, not with anger, but with blessing. May his soul remember what you offered. May his shadow be softened by your absence. May his next dream carry your scent. Because you didn't just love him, you summoned him, and he wasn't ready to be called. Before we move into the final chapter, where the woman becomes the voice he cannot silence, I will tell you this. The war was never between you and him. It was always between who he pretends to be and who he was born to become. And your presence is the battlefield. You're still in his dreams, not the polished you, not the soft-spoken, smiling version that fits into the shape he imagined when he thought of a good woman. No, it's the untamed you that returns, the one who didn't flinch when he turned cold, the one who held your gaze when his lies trembled under your silence, the one who let him go without a single plea. And it haunts him, because while the world has taught him to chase comfort, it never taught him what to do when he meets the sacred. And you, woman who walked away with grace, woman who said no without drama, you became the silence that echoes louder than his own thoughts. This is what happens when a woman reclaims her erotic soul. She doesn't disappear when she leaves. She multiplies. In every moment, he touches another woman's skin and doesn't feel fire. In every conversation that skirts truth. In every quiet hour when the noise fades and her voice returns, not as a memory, but as instruction. You have become the initiation he refused to take, and now you live in the marrow of his becoming. Carl Jung once described the anima, the feminine within a man, as the guide to the inner world. But he also warned, if a man rejects this guide, she becomes his tormentor. That's what you are now. Not his enemy, not his regret, but the presence that refuses to be erased. The voice beneath every excuse. The heartbeat beneath every distraction. Because you didn't just hold him, you mirrored him, and he cannot unsee what you reveal. At first, he'll try to replace you. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much. He'll seek distraction, dopamine, validation, anything to silence the call. But it doesn't work, because you are not a woman. You are a cipher, a portal, a sacred code that he stumbled into before he was ready. And his soul, even if he never says it, even if he never returns, has already been altered. You are the prayer he never learned how to speak, but now echoes in his bones. This is the paradox of awakened feminine energy. She's not loud, but she's unignorable. She does not beg to be remembered. She becomes remembrance. Your silence is his oracle. And while he may never say it aloud, while he may spend years building a life that looks untouched by you, behind his eyes, you remain, because you are not a woman he lost. You are a self he hasn't yet met. Let's speak plainly now. What you endured was not rejection. It was a rite of passage. What you held was not unrequited love. It was a mirror that cracked illusions. What you gave was not wasted. It was a seed. And that seed, buried in the heat of your absence, will either rot or bloom. That is not your concern. Your path was never about keeping a man. It was about becoming the kind of woman who can't be forgotten. You do not need to check his page. You do not need to wonder if he dreams of you. You are the dream, because you touched him in the one place he cannot armor, his essence. And now, every woman he meets is measured against that touch. Not with blame, not with comparison, but with ache. An ache he cannot name. That's how you know you've entered his soul. Not through drama, but through absence that reverberates. And here's the deeper truth, the one you already feel. You didn't come here to be chosen. You came here to awaken, to walk through fire and come out unburned, to sit in silence and find ecstasy, to let every man who feared your fire drift back into the fog, while you stood still, becoming the storm. The woman who becomes the voice he cannot silence is not loud. She is rooted. She walks differently now. Her hips carry myth. Her gaze burns stories. Her laughter bends timelines. She's no longer searching. She's summoning. And when she loves again, because yes, she will, it will not be with the desperation of being filled. It will be with the clarity of someone who has already become whole. She does not ask, will he choose me? She asks, will he recognize himself in me and stay? Not out of fear, but from devotion, not to her body, but to the truth she carries. This is the feminine path. Not a trail of lovers or heartbreaks, but a spiral inward, where each encounter peels another layer of illusion, revealing not what love is, but what love demands. Because the real feminine doesn't want attention. She wants reverence, not flattery, but worship. Not performance, but presence. And most will not give it. That's why the path is lonely at times. Not because no one comes, but because most cannot stay. But when he does, the one who can, he will not be frightened by your silence. He will not need to own you. He will not rush your rhythms. He will come barefoot, palms open, not to fix, not to tame, but to remember. To remember the sacred within him that only you could reflect. Until then, let your solitude be your sanctuary. Let your body remain untouched by anything that does not feel like worship. Let your voice echo through the minds of men who once held you, not with bitterness, but with a smile. Because you know what they don't. You were not left behind. You were sent ahead to prepare the world for a new kind of love. One that does not conquer. One that does not perform. One that does not leave when it gets real. You are not waiting. You are not wounded. You are the oracle. And the voice he cannot silence is the part of him that knows he has already met God, and she looked like you. Thank you for walking this path with me. May this journey remind you that your sacred erotic energy, your truth, your longing, your refusal to be smaller, is not a flaw. It is a frequency, one that calls the brave. And for every man who couldn't stay, may they remember you not as a loss, but as the beginning of their awakening. I'll meet you again, when your voice is ready to speak even deeper truths from the place that needs no explanation. Until then, stay wild, stay holy, stay you.